Good morning. I'm Susannah Murphy. My pronouns are she, her, and welcome to Reformation Sunday, where we're going to talk about the relationship between Reformation and reconciling. God's peace be with you.
And also with you.
I'd like to acknowledge that we are in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish, Kootenai, and Kalispel tribes. Today we honor the path they have always shown us in caring for this place now and for generations to come. The work of Reformation, the work of reconciling, is to care for the generations here and the generations to come. Reformation and reconciling seem like siblings to me. I did the typical speech team geek thing and looked up definitions. And reformation means to form again or to change. And reconcile means to restore friendly relations between, to cause to coexist in harmony, to make or show to be compatible. Those seem like sibling terms to me. When we look at the ELCA website, there's a beautiful little piece that I'm going to read for you that I actually cheated and pulled out of I did go to the website, but also it's mentioned in our Reconciling Works pamphlet about scriptures. And on the ELC website, it tells us a cradle that holds the infant Jesus, baby blankets that clothe the newborn Christ. Lutherans often use these well-known metaphors from Martin Luther to describe the Christian scriptures and their importance. These simple metaphors clearly and profoundly describe both what the scriptures are and what is their purpose. Simply stated, the scriptures tell us about Jesus Christ. The Holy Spirit uses the scriptures to present Jesus to all who listen or read them. That is why Lutherans say that the scriptures are the source and norm of their teaching and practice. As the gospel writer John wrote, these things are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name. And that's from John 20, verse 31. I'm still reading off of the website. Obviously, scriptures that are collected into a book or Bible describe and speak about many other things, everything from the creation of the world to the world's end, because these writings originate from a time period that spans about 1,000 years and come to us from a variety of handwritten manuscripts and fragments. They have been studied carefully with all the tools of research that are available. This research continues to enrich the understanding of the scriptures and their message. Despite the diversity of viewpoints and the complexity of the many narratives contained in the scriptures, Lutherans believe that the story of God's steadfast love and mercy in Jesus is the heart and center of what the scriptures have to say. I need reformation. I need to be formed again every day, and I am so grateful for the abundant love of Christ that's been shared with me through Emmanuel Lutheran. Our congregation has walked beside me through the joy of early motherhood, my first adult encounter with the reality of our church family disagreeing and then healing, the relief and retooling of my diagnosis with mental illness. Y'all will be here alongside me for every new renovation God provides. I want that for everyone. I acknowledge my privilege. As a white, cisgender, heterosexual person, I've been given what I may or may not have earned: dignity, respect, opportunity, and welcome. Is it my belief as a Christian that there is no way to earn the love of Christ, the dignity, this respect, this welcome? I have heard the words of grace spoken over me as a lullaby to soothe my untethered heart. I want that for everyone. My story, what brings me to this work. My journey toward the LGBTQ plus community came early in my adulthood. My sorority came out to me literally while I was standing in our closet. My coworker at the University of Montana UC Market trusted me with her story. I watched them navigate that world in the late 80s with wonder and admiration. They had so much to lose simply by being themselves. Yet they moved through our world as their authentic self. At an open mic in the UC, I recall that with a quavering voice, I said that I would stand between my friends and harm. It turned out to be a little more complex than taking a slur or a slap. I became a teacher. When I began teaching middle schoolers, they would share with me their stories. Sometimes this meant that I was the only safe place they could trust to say who they really were. Still today, after sponsoring the first GSA, which is Genders and Sexualities Alliance in our school, having rainbows and affirming quotes all displayed all around our learning space, students come to me in whispers or small smiles or tears to tell me who they are in their heart, who they cannot share with their parents, their classmates, their community. This is why it is so important to me that I play an active role in the work of reforming and reconciling our congregation as a safe place. I know the pounding in my heart and the sacred gift of trust that comes from my open welcome in the classroom. I want this for all of us. Emmanuel, I want this for our congregation. Let us be reconciled to a history that has not always welcomed our siblings of color with disabilities who identify apart from a male heteronormative norm created so long ago. Let us be a welcoming, safe, affirming place where justice reigns. In the world outside our worship space, there are changes that make the task of showing our welcome, our sanctuary, our safe harbor ever more critical. Let's shout that we as Emmanuel Lutheran are a place where Jesus' radical welcome is at our heart. Let us not hide our welcome, but proclaim aloud that love reigns here. Reformation and reconciliation seem like siblings to me. That's what I got ready. I would love to hear what other folks feel about Reformation and reconciliation and maybe how they're connected or maybe they contrast with one another.
Well, when I was thinking of this, I'm Jean, retired pastor. When I was thinking of this, I was tuning into the sort of the Reformation. One of the Reformation mottos is always reforming. You know, the Marines say semper fi, always faithful. That could be ours, but it's like semper reformatus. We're always reforming. And, you know, the church always has to do that. I mean, Luther did it way back when in relationship to what was going on in his day. And so I see the churches opening up to radical welcome of all people, including LGBTQI folks, is just part of that journey. We're still on it. We're always reforming. And so, yeah, we're still doing it. We still need to do it. So I loved it, Susannah, when you brought up to our team that we've got to have this conversation today. Thank you.
I'm also lucky enough to be an Al-Anon person. And one of the catchphrases I love the most is you're either green and growing or you're ripe and rotting. If we're not reforming all the time and reconciling with our past and our present and working toward a reformation in the future, then we're ripe and rotting. So it's exciting for me that Emmanuel has been open and welcoming and loving enough to see this as worthwhile. Panting is uh, yeah.
Do we have dogs in?
Seems like we might.
Good friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the other day Alan sent me I can't remember, he was texting back and forth and he says something about how many Lutherans does it take to change a light bulb? And he says, you know, that's not really true at Emmanuel. Emmanuel has been very willing along the way to change. And I mean, we think we always reforming, you know, we were probably one of the first churches that were doing some of that early, the spirit alive, you know, and I think God, I believe that God prepares us in ways so that when we get to those hard questions, then we've got some experience doing that. And maybe all of those little steps along the way, that's what it's done. We've been preparing because this is a hard question. So hopefully you know, the people before us have prepared us so that we're ready for this hard question.
Yeah, we have some tools, some abilities and some framework in our hearts and our heads to put it together that change isn't bad.
I would also add the word refuge. I remember being a student and coming to church. I was here as pastor all by myself right after Christmas. He came to the door, I let him in, and he was saying that his father would no longer accept him because he had just come out as a gay person. And I called his father. Both of them were strangers. Called the father on the phone and said, you know, I'm not trying to argue with you. He still is your son. He said, no, he's not. And I'm glad that that young man came to the church. You know, and I don't know what effect that had on him, that little encounter, but I was brokenhearted for him. And if the church can communicate that to the community, that we are welcoming, this is a refuge. I think that's so important.
Absolutely.
I don't get that. I don't get how you can repudiate your own child. Your child is not you. Your child is a whole individual on themselves. You need to learn to love and accept them the way they are. They're a gift from God to you. And I don't know. I can't understand that at all. I have no comprehension of parents who cannot love their children, no matter who they are and how they are.
I pray about that a lot. Please let this family be who their child is as a whole person. And love them as a whole person. And the idea of refuge, isn't that a synonym for sanctuary? So, yeah. We need to be that. We're called for that. For sure.
Yesterday, he told me a long time ago that he was atheist, and I was like, okay. And he was telling me that he was watching a movie or something, and there was a person who went to a priest or a pastor of some kind of minister and said, I want to confess something to you. And they were kind of in a public place. And he said, well, just whisper it to me. This is just a few of me. And he said that the person was obviously very upset and whispered into the minister's ear. And the minister said, there is no sin greater than God's love. And so Sam was telling me this. I was like, hey. I'm like, then what? And he goes, no, that was it. And he's like, I was just amazed by that. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that's like what Christianity is. That's like the whole point. Yeah, it was funny because it was like an aha for him. And I'm like, yeah. And then what? Like, I just thought there was more to it because I was like, yeah, I already know that. But I mean, that was kind of crazy to me. But that's the thing is like, I think people have just become, you know, what people hear most a lot of times are negative things. And so of course they think of, sometimes people think Christians, if they're not a Christian themselves, or maybe that's how their church is too, but they just think that it's all about judgment. And I just disagree with that. I don't think it's about judgment at all. I think it's about being inclusive. I think it's about being loving and sharing Christ with all. With all is not accept these people. All is all.
Not just who looks or acts or loves the way I do.
Yeah. I mean, so I just think that's so powerful. So I was telling them, I said, especially like with the ELC, hey, the Lutheran Church, we're not even, it's grace by faith alone. It's not works. And I said, that's really the intention. That's what it says right in the Bible. So, but I don't know. I just thought I thought that was really cool that stood out to him so much. And he was just like so amazed by that. Yeah, something to potentially explore further.
Yeah.
Sounds like a little crack in the window.
Conversation on the program, you know, it's very. But yeah, but I just thought that was great. I'm glad that he heard that and that it stood out to him. And because a lot of times you do just hear about the negative things, not really positive things. And I think becoming a church, a reconciling in Christ church, is making a grand public statement that are all the guidance that we're from God, that we're called to do.
Yeah, I believe, and I don't think we're just reconciling. I think it can be perceived as reconciling with the LGBTQIA community. But listening to you just now and hearing in my head the words reconciling in Christ, I think we're bringing ourselves into alignment with what we already hold as belief. I think the work is to bring ourselves to have integrity and to come back to reconcile with what is true for us already. Like well, yeah, and then what?
See you, Audrey. Bye, Tuffy. Well, this sort of brings me back to the whole notion of Reformation, because it seems in our culture now, the rate of change is so rapid that some folks take great comfort in stuff that just never changes. Right? I mean, the pace of change is astonishing. And so the churches that say God never changes and we never change, the law never changes, and we just stay there, and that's what it means to be faithful, is really opposite of what a Reformation understanding is, because it's pretty radical. That no, the church changes, our understanding of Scripture changes, and to me, I mean, the wild thing is God changes. Does God change? You know, I mean, here's the great Old Testament story, right? When it's Abraham, help me out, Greg, I think, that's arguing with God about destroying Sodom. And said, well, okay, God says, I'm going to destroy them. They're just awful. And Abraham says, well, no, wait a minute. What if there are 40 righteous people there? Will you destroy them? No, probably not. What about if there are 20 righteous people? No. What if there are 10? You know, and so Abraham helps God change God's mind. That's how I read it, which just blows me away. Right? I mean, because I was raised with this notion of one thing that defines God is that God never changes. But Reformation says, whoa, here we are on this journey together, and let's try to change faithfully and not be afraid of that. So I think the reconciling and pricing is just right in line with that.
I've been doing a read the Bible in a year. I'm doing it in conjunction with collaboration with my sister and my niece. And, you know, the Old Testament has been so hard to read because it's just seems like people can just never get it right and God gets angry and then something happens and then, you know, it just keeps going on. And part of me says, why did it take God so long to figure out that he needed to send Jesus, you know? But then I read, here's this prophecy way back. So it was part of his plan, you know, way back when to do that, to send Jesus. But my gosh, there were a lot of people that didn't do it right for a long time. So, you know, God changes. I mean, if you really think about the difference between the Old and the New Testament, God really did change his mind about, you know, what we need to do and who we are. So because yeah, I never thought about God changing, you know, until you said that.
Well, and there's a parable that Jesus told of the widow and the hanging. And that I got to see my Aunt Lynn last week, and she's one of my favorite people, and she says, well, at about 10 o'clock every night, you should know that I'm nagging God for you. Like, I love to nag God. And she has faithfully prayed for me my whole life long. And probably gotten me out of a couple sticky situations. And the Bible tells us, be persistent, keep asking for what you need, and God will hear you. But you might have to be a real thorn under the saddle blanket. This seems like a decent time to ask if anybody has something on their mind or their heart. We would love to hear it. Also, I would like to say that the members of the Reconciling in Christ team are available to you for questions and concerns. Our team is myself, Susannah Murphy, and Jean Larson, and Kevin Pack, Linda Redfern, and Pastor Molly, and
And Lonnie.
Lonnie's, what's Lonnie's last name?
Nielsen could tell.
Nielsen could tell, yeah. So reach out to us in the website for the church. You can find us in there, and we would be honored to be part of the conversation that you're having with yourself or with the other members of your household or with people in the community. If you need any resources, that's sort of what we're supposed to know how to help with. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of this process. And it's my prayer that as we go forward into these next weeks, we can look forward to a welcome that Jesus would smile about. Thank you.